Another intergovernmental organization, the World Meteorological Organization. Dr. Love, Jeff, we're going to perhaps look a little bit more at your role. What does the WMO do for disaster risk reduction? What exactly is your role in this?
Thank you, Maria, and good morning. Yes, disaster risk reduction is actually a big mouthful, and I like to think of it simplistically as disaster prevention. And we all know that from time immemorial there's been hurricanes and typhoons or tropical cyclones, whatever you want to call them, winter gales, winter storms, and they are extreme weather events, and what we have to do is stop those extreme weather events becoming disasters. And that means a sense of looking forward, as you were just saying to Stefan, looking forward, making sure that ship design is up to the conditions that the ships are going to encounter, but also from a meteorological perspective, the warnings we issue are received by the people who need them and they're acted upon, and that's no simple thing either. But what we have to do is get early warning out so that shipping isn't exposed to the extreme weather when it can't handle it. It can take sensible avoidance, and we can reduce the risk of disasters. Just to step back, I mean, if you look at over the last couple of decades, our estimates are about $1.5 to $2 trillion worth of damage from weather-related disasters to the global economy over the last 20 years. Probably about 75% of all loss of life and all loss of property in disasters are weather-related disasters. So there's clearly a lot of disaster prevention or disaster risk reduction to be done. The scope for the work is enormous, and we do have to look forward in doing that.
Perhaps I could just ask you to just elaborate just a little bit more on the WMO's operational concept. Exactly what are the parts that come into this early warning system to prepare for emergencies?
Sure, and you know, the maritime aspect of it, quite clearly we have to work very closely with the IMO and the IHO in terms of the hydrographers, in terms of particularly in the pollution area, but our role is to make sure that we play our part in an end-to-end system in a global sense, and so the WMO helps the national meteorological services work with the marine safety authorities in their country, fit within a global framework, and for example, our forecast areas, our warning areas are precisely the same as the IMO's global marine distress safety system, GMDSS areas, and we try and coordinate how we work together globally so that it all fits seamlessly, and when mariners receive warnings, they know where they're for and who they're coming from, and they understand the background.
It's fairly complex system of getting messages out. I understand, I think we all do, the way in which you can interface with other intergovernmental organizations, but your interface with regional, national, and directly with masters of vessels, how does that work? Are you able to do it, or do you have to pass through other authorities?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and like all good questions, not a simple answer. It depends on the country. The WMO essentially coordinates the national meteorological services. In some countries, I'm an Australian, if you hadn't noticed from my accent, and until a month or two ago I was heading the Met Service in Australia. We did the broadcast of all the warnings. We did the broadcast of all the marine meteorological information. But in other countries it goes to safety authorities, marine authorities. It gets passed on in different ways, and so you need regional coordination of the mechanisms. And in some countries, in some parts of the world, as many of you would be aware, there isn't national capability, and in fact there are significant gaps in getting the information to the mariners. And in fact, while we're just on that for a very brief moment, the SOLAS Convention, as I suspect everybody in this room understands, applies to ships of 300 tonnes and over. But in fact, there are many, many smaller boats out there, particularly in coastal waters, who also are exposed, much more exposed than the bigger shipping. And getting services to those sailors is a real challenge, and they are the ones that get into trouble and finish up on the rocks and create enormous national pressure on safety organisations for rescue and those sorts of things. And so it becomes very much building capacity in the countries around the world, and that's part of the WMO's role and the IMO. And in fact, an organisation I haven't mentioned is UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, the IOC, and we work very closely with the IOC as well in gathering marine data and using it in these systems. So there's a lot of international cooperation, and then it's got to funnel down to regional and national.
Well, Jeff, if I had to ask you in this respect, obviously we're talking about the saving of lives as well as of property. If there was one or two areas where you think things are not working as well, as fast, as directly as they could, this is an embarrassing question to put to somebody coming from an intergovernmental organization, what would be your wish list, high on your wish list of things that would make your work even more effective? Yes. Can you speak right into the microphone?
Sure. Once again, I'm not going to answer your question directly, Maria. There's no golden bullet. There is no golden bullet to any of this. It's about doing a lot of things on a lot of fronts. I hope there's people from who are responsible for vessels in front of me, because we just need more meteorological observations from ships. That always helps. We need to build capacity in the developing world, because there are enormous gaps in the developing world. We need to use new technologies better. We need to increase our use of satellite systems, because they plug a lot of gaps around the world. We need to keep working on our international cooperation. We can never take it for granted that the WMO, the IMO, the IOC, the IHO, we all have to keep working together. We've got to keep working on every front, and we've got to get the message out that those people who care really have to work together, cooperate, all pull in the same direction, even when sometimes national priorities maybe are a little bit different to the global priorities. In the end, the big picture counts, and people on the high seas particularly really just do need a global effort. And so there's no silver bullet. I think we just have to tackle every aspect of the problem with the energy and the resources we've got, which never seem to be enough.
And which also, as an intergovernmental organization, means that you are not always able to intervene directly, but you have to do it through governments. Just as a reminder to everyone, perhaps anyone can answer this question, the most spectacular incidents at sea have really been those of very large chemical or oil spills. They have been large ships, they've captured the imagination, but the most loss of life happens more frequently with the smaller vessels in areas where you and your organizations don't always have a direct and easy reach. Is this correct or not?
Yeah, well, loss of life in natural disasters is interesting, and other of the panel may have a view, but if you look at it, if you look at the insurance records, most of the loss of property happens in the developed world, and most of the loss of life happens in the developing world. Yeah. And that's sort of the way it breaks down, except for Hurricane Katrina. That's pretty much the rule. And so the role of Met Services, in my case, is really in the developing world to reduce the loss of life, and in the developed world to have an impact on the planning, particularly the coastal planning, so that the loss of property is reduced. But yes, I think in aggregate, most of the loss of life is in smaller vessels rather than, since the Titanic, I guess, in smaller vessels. And that's of concern and a focus.